The first sign was a ripple in the stars. It began just after midnight over the Pacific, when satellite operators noticed streaks of light darting between constellations. They assumed it was debris from some forgotten launch. Then the streaks grew brighter, sharper, and moved far too precisely to be drifting metal. Commander Alina Voss stood at the observation deck of Aegis Station, a defensive platform in low Earth orbit. The great blue curve of the planet filled her view, serene and silent, until the first streak ignited. It flared into a lance of fire, a controlled burn through atmosphere, heading for the surface. "Telemetry is off the charts," reported. Ensign Reza, his voice tight. "No identification, no known trajectory pattern." Voss leaned forward. "How many?" "Multiple. 20. No, 30 inbound. All at orbital velocity." The station's alert sirens wailed. Around her, crew scrambled to battle stations, pulling on helmets and strapping into control consoles. Outside the glass, more streaks appeared, burning crimson against the night side of Earth. Then the impacts began. From orbit, they looked like blossoms of light on the surface, beautiful if one ignored the reality beneath them. Power grids failed in an instant. Major cities plunged into darkness. Emergency channels filled with urgent chatter, then went silent as communication hubs collapsed. Voss's earpiece crackled with the voice of Central Command. "Commander, you are witnessing a coordinated attack. All orbital assets are to engage. By who?" she demanded. "We have no contact, no warning." But before she could finish, the unknown warships arrived. They slipped into view from the shadow of the moon, sleek, blade-like vessels longer than any human craft, their hulls ablack. That swallowed starlight. They moved in silence, drifting forward as if unhurried, and yet within moments they filled the tactical display. Strange glyphs glimmered faintly along their sides, symbols no linguist on Earth would recognize. Weapons fire flashed, beams of white-gold energy that cut through the void. The first shot struck a Terran defense frigate, vaporizing it before its crew could react. Voss steadied her voice. "All batteries target nearest vessel. Launch defensive drones. Hold formation." The station's railguns barked, sending hypersonic slugs into the dark warships. Some shots struck, but most were intercepted by shimmering barriers, energy shields of a kind humanity had only theorized. The enemy barely flinched before returning fire. Within minutes, Aegis Station lost 2 of its escort frigates. Shrapnel spun through the void, glittering briefly before vanishing into the darkness. "They're not targeting randomly," Reza reported, eyes on the tactical display. "They're going for communications relays, power transmitters, and defense hubs. Strategic precision." Voss studied the enemy's movements, her mind racing. They've done this before. The thought chilled her. Whoever they were, they had practiced this kind of planetary strike many times. As another wave of beams scorched past, she noticed something strange. Certain areas of orbit remained untouched. The enemy ships steered clear of those zones entirely, as if avoiding invisible hazards. "Navigation. Mark those coordinates," she ordered. "Plot us a course through them." "But ma'am, those are high interference regions, old satellite, debris fields, unstable EM activity." "Exactly," she replied. "They won't follow us in." It was a gamble. Moving into those zones meant losing reliable sensors and risking collision with forgotten relics of spaceflight. But staying in open orbit was certain destruction. "Aye, course laid in," navigation confirmed. The station thrusters fired, and Aegis Station shifted, slipping toward the debris-choked sectors. Enemy beams tracked them for a moment, then stopped. The black ships drifted in pursuit but never crossed the boundary. It worked. For now. But Earth below was still burning. Reports streamed in. Energy surges in the Americas, blackout in Europe, aerial incursions over Asia. The attackers were striking across the globe, and humanity had no name for them, no way to communicate, only the certainty that they had arrived with purpose. Voss gripped the railing, her knuckles white. This was no random act of aggression. It was an opening move in a war humanity hadn't even known it was fighting. She turned to her crew, her voice steady but hard. "Find me everything about those ships, their patterns, their weapons, their weaknesses. If they came here to end us, we'll make sure they regret it." Below them, the blue of Earth was marred by growing swaths of darkness, like ink spreading across water. And above, the alien fleet waited in the shadows, silent and implacable. The day the sky burned had only just begun. The debris field was a graveyard of human ambition. Tumbling satellites, twisted fragments of old stations, and the skeletal remains of forgotten missions drifted silently, catching occasional flashes of light from distant explosions. Aegis Station crept through it like a cautious predator, thrusters whispering as navigation systems plotted each evasive movement. Commander Voss kept her eyes on the tactical feed. "Report on our escorts." Reza's tone was grim. "Frigate. Solace lost engines. Lifeboats launched, but enemy fire intercepted most of them. Vanguard is holding, but she's venting atmosphere from the port side." Voss exhaled slowly, keeping her expression neutral. The crew didn't need to see her fear. "Order Vanguard to shadow our path. No independent maneuvers. If we split, we're done." Through the forward viewport, the alien fleet prowled along the edge of the interference zone. The black hulls gleamed faintly in reflected sunlight, their movement deliberate, like predators circling a wounded herd. They never entered the debris zone, but they didn't retreat either. "They're waiting," Voss murmured. "For what?" Reza asked. "For us to come back out." A sudden burst of static filled the comms as the station passed through an EM hotspot. Screens flickered, some going black before stabilizing. The interference wasn't just blinding to the enemy, it hampered them as well. It was like hiding in a storm, while your opponent lurked in the clear air beyond. "Commander." Navigation. Called out. "If we stay here too long, collision risk goes up exponentially. Some of these debris chunks are moving at 7 kilometers a second." "Understood. Keep the deflectors charged and feed me hazard updates every 30 seconds. From Earth's surface, calls for help still poured in. Civilians were trapped in cities with no power and no way to evacuate. Military outposts on the ground were being overrun by smaller alien craft that moved with unnerving coordination. Voss tapped her console and opened a channel to the orbital defense network. Static hissed, then a faint voice broke through. "Admiral Sorensen." Voice strained. "Voss, enemy targeting patterns. Avoid interference. Find weakness." The transmission dissolved into garbled noise. Reza frowned. "That's the second confirmation of the blind zones. If we could map them planet-wide, we might have a way to maneuver without being targeted," Voss finished. The crew exchanged quick glances. A plan was forming, but it would require something dangerous, sending out reconnaissance drones into the kill zone beyond the debris field. She made the call. "Launch 5 scouts. Equip them with full-spectrum sensors and keep them on evasive pattern. I want blind zone coordinates across multiple orbital layers." The small, needle-like drones detached from the station's hull and streaked out toward as the enemy fleet. At first, the black warships ignored them, but as one drone crossed into open space, a thin beam of light sliced through it, turning it into dust. 4 drones remained. Voss gritted her teeth as another was lost, then another. 2 returned, their hulls scorched but intact. Data poured in, revealing patterns, vast, irregular zones where enemy weapons simply didn't fire. It was a start. "Plot these into the defense network," Voss ordered. "Transmit to all surviving vessels. If we can predict their targeting gaps, we can last longer." The station shook violently, alarms flaring. "Hit on section B12, shouted engineering. "Minimal damage, but shields at 70%. "How?" Reza demanded. "We're still inside the interference zone." A cold realization settled over Voss. "They're testing shots. They can't see us clearly, but they're firing at random, hoping to get lucky. The enemy warships were patient. Too patient. Voss knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. Supplies were finite, and the enemy's ground forces were gaining control. Every minute bought here was bought at the expense of cities below. "Prepare for a counter-strike," she said finally. "If they think we're cornered, we'll make them bleed for every meter." Her crew straightened, a spark of defiance lighting in their eyes. From the depths of the debris field, Aegis Station's weapons cycled up. Railguns locked on, missile bays armed. Somewhere beyond the static haze, humanity's last orbital defenders readied themselves for a stand they might not survive. In the blackness beyond the interference, the alien ships seemed to sense the shift. They turned slightly, their dark, hulls aligning like the heads of predators preparing to strike. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the battle began. The aftermath of the orbital skirmish left Aegis Station battered but intact. Debris drifted lazily outside the viewports, the remains of destroyed enemy probes and human defense craft alike. The silence between weapons discharges was almost worse than the noise. It felt like the pause in a storm when you know the worst is yet to come. Commander Voss stood over the central holotable as streams of telemetry scrolled in. 2 surviving reconnaissance drones had returned with more than just coordinates. They had captured strange fluctuations in the alien fleet's targeting arrays. Lieutenant Reza leaned over the display. "Here, see that drop in emissions? Every time they skirt the edges of these electromagnetic pockets, their targeting systems flatline for a fraction of a second. In some cases, their active scans switch off entirely." "Why?" Voss asked, narrowing her eyes. "No idea. Could be their sensors are sensitive to certain EM frequencies. Or maybe their systems overload in high interference zones. But if we can generate those conditions artificially," Voss understood immediately, "we could blind them anywhere, not just in the natural interference zones." The crew exchanged hopeful glances. It wasn't much, but it was the first tangible advantage they'd seen since the invasion began. "Run simulations," she ordered. "See how much coverage we'd need to mask a fleet of our size." The tactical officer, Ensign Nyla Park, frowned as she scrolled through calculations. "Commander, it's possible, but the power requirements are extreme. We'd have to divert from shields and life support to keep the interference field running at combat strength. Meaning if it fails mid-battle, we're dead before we can reset it," Voss said. "Exactly." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from Ground Command. The feed was static-ridden, but the voice was urgent. "Colonel Mercer from the Pacific Defense Grid. Commander, we've confirmed your data on the blind spots. Ground forces report similar gaps in targeting from enemy walkers, almost as if they lose tracking near certain communications towers. We're thinking there's a frequency overlap. If we can sync your orbital interference with our ground systems, we might be able to shield entire districts at once." Voss's mind was already turning. "Colonel, can you transmit those frequency profiles to us?" "They're on their way now. But you should know, enemy forces are advancing on the remaining broadcast towers. If they take them, we lose our ground-side interference capability entirely." "Understood. Hold as long as you can. We'll keep them busy up here." The channel cut out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Everyone knew what "hold as long as you can" meant. Within an hour, the combined orbital and ground data confirmed the theory. The alien fleet's targeting depended on ultra-sensitive sensor arrays vulnerable to interference in very specific frequency bands. These weren't weaknesses a human designer would tolerate, which suggested something important. The invaders had never fought in a high EM environment before. Reza was quick to point it out. "Commander, think about it. They didn't develop this weakness by accident. It means they're from a part of space where electromagnetic storms are rare. They didn't expect a planet like Earth to fight back with such chaotic conditions." "Then chaos is exactly what we'll give them," Voss replied. A plan began to take shape, Every surviving defense ship in orbit would be equipped with jury-rigged interference generators, each tuned to the discovered frequency bands. On the ground, resistance forces would guard key broadcast towers at all costs, flooding targeted zones with overlapping interference to shield both civilians and military movements. The risk was staggering, pushing their systems to generate. That much EM output could burn out circuits permanently, and there was no guarantee the enemy wouldn't adapt. But doing nothing meant Earth's cities would fall one by one until nothing remained. As the engineers worked, Voss allowed herself a moment at the viewport. The alien ships hung in the distance, black silhouettes against the cold shimmer of the Earth's curve. They were confident, patient, unaware that their prey had just found a knife in the dark. Reza joined her, voice low. "They think they're hunting us." "They are," Voss said, her tone steel. "But hunters can bleed." In the darkness, Aegis Station powered up its new array. Invisible waves began to ripple outward, faint distortions that only the enemy's instruments would notice. The first phase of humanity's counterattack had begun. The city had no name anymore. Signs were gone, streets were unrecognizable, and the air carried a bitter haze that blurred the skyline. What had once been a bustling coastal metropolis was now a battlefield where shadows moved between collapsed buildings. Sergeant Darius Kane crouched behind a toppled tram car, scanning the avenue ahead. His squad of 8 resistance fighters was spread out in the ruins, weapons aimed at the intersection where the sound of mechanical footsteps echoed closer. "They're coming," whispered Corporal Lin, adjusting the scope of her rail rifle. The enemy walkers appeared first, towering, machines with insect-like legs, each step sending tremors through the ground. They moved with unnerving precision, scanning rooftops and alleys with sweeping beams of pale blue light. Behind them marched alien infantry in segmented armor, their weapons humming with restrained power. Kane raised his hand. "Hold fire until..." They crossed the choke point. The choke point was a collapsed overpass that funneled the invaders into a narrow corridor. The squad had rigged the area with makeshift explosives, salvaged demolition charges wired into a portable detonator. It wasn't much, but it could at least slow the enemy advance. As the first walker entered the kill zone, Kane gave the signal. The explosion shattered the street, sending concrete and shrapnel into the alien formation. One walker collapsed in a heap of twisted limbs. The others staggered but quickly adjusted, their armor shrugging off the worst of the blast. "Open fire!" Kane ordered. Rail slugs and pulse rounds lit up the intersection. 2 alien infantry fell immediately, their armor breached by concentrated fire. But the survivors reacted with terrifying speed, returning fire with arcs of energy that scorched. "Walls and melted cover! Fall back!" Kane barked, grabbing Lin by the shoulder as they sprinted toward the next barricade. The squad retreated through a narrow side street, using smoke grenades to mask their movement. They had no illusions of holding the city block indefinitely. This was a fighting withdrawal, meant to lure the enemy toward a far more valuable target. The downed alien transport they had discovered 2 days earlier. The transport had crashed into the lower levels of a parking structure half buried in debris. Its hull was scarred but largely intact, and more importantly, its command console was still powered. The Resistance's tech specialist, Mateo Ortiz, had been working non-stop to decode it. When Kane's squad burst into the dim space, Ortiz barely looked up from the alien controls. "Bought me some more time?" he asked, fingers flying across a jury-rigged human interface patched into the console. "Not much," Kane replied. "They're right behind us." Ortiz grinned despite the tension. "Then you'll like this. Think I've cracked their short-range comms encryption. I can send a false squad recall signal. Make them think this sector's compromised." "That'll scatter them," Kane said. "Do it!" Ortiz tapped a final command. A low hum filled the transport as its systems transmitted the signal in. a series of complex pulses invisible to human senses. Moments later, the alien troops outside slowed their advance. The walkers halted, their scanners sweeping in confusion. Then, almost as if on cue, they began to withdraw, retreating back toward the main avenue. The squad exhaled in relief. Lynn gave Kane a nod. "That bought us breathing room?" Kane wasn't so sure. "Temporary breathing room. They'll figure out the signal's a fake sooner or later." Ortiz disconnected his setup and pointed to the console. "We can do more than fake orders. If I can fully map this interface, we might be able to overload their walkers' power cores or trigger weapon malfunctions remotely. We'd need a stable uplink, though, and that means linking this thing to the orbital fleet's interference network." Kane thought of the data Commander Voss had shared, about the alien sensor vulnerabilities. If they could combine that with control over the enemy's own machines, the resistance could punch far above its weight. "Then we protect this transport at all costs," Kane said. "This is no longer just salvage, it's a weapon." Outside, distant explosions marked the alien push into other sectors. The ground war had truly begun, and Kane knew the city's streets would only get deadlier. But for the first time since the invasion started, he also knew they weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. 2 days after Kane's squad uncovered the crashed alien transport, a secure channel linked the underground command post beneath the ruined city to Aegis Station in orbit. The grainy hollow screen flickered, revealing Commander Voss standing beside her tactical display. Her uniform was worn, and her eyes showed the same exhaustion Kane felt, but there was a sharp focus behind them. "Sergeant Kane," she began, "your find changes everything. Ortiz's work on that alien console means we can now directly disrupt their ground forces, in addition to blinding their sensors. But we need to combine our capabilities. That means linking your uplink to the interference network in orbit." Kane nodded. "Ortiz says we can do it, but we'll need a high-bandwidth transmitter, something strong enough to pierce their jamming. Closest one still operational is in Sector Delta." Reza's voice came from off-screen. "Sector Delta is in the middle of a heavy enemy occupation zone. They're using it as a relay point for their own signals." Kane gave a grim smile. "Then, we take it back." Voss tapped the holotable, projecting a rotating schematic of the alien fleet's movements. "If we time this right, I can coordinate orbital strikes to distract their ships while you move in on the tower. Once the link is up, we initiate Operation Iron Veil, simultaneous interference flooding from orbit and planet, plus command overrides on their ground forces." "We hit them everywhere at once!" Ortiz stepped into frame beside Kane. "And if it works, we won't just jam them. We can trigger misfires in their walkers, force their drones to power down, even turn their targeting systems against their own fleet. We'd be turning their precision into chaos." "That's the point," Voss said. "They've never fought in chaos." The next morning, Kane's squad set out before dawn. They moved through the ruined streets like shadows, avoiding patrols and using the city's skeletal structures as cover. Overhead, Aegis Station maneuvered into position, preparing its interference array for activation. Lynn's voice came over. Comms. "Contact. 2 drones ahead. Rooftop level." Kane raised his rifle but stopped when Ortiz tapped his shoulder. "Let me try something." Using a portable transmitter linked to the alien console's recovered software, Ortiz sent a brief burst of data toward the drones. They faltered mid-flight, their lights flickering before they drifted sideways and crashed into the street below. "Still think this isn't worth the risk?" Ortiz said, grinning. "Just keep it working when it counts," Kane replied. They reached the base of the Sector Delta Tower by midday. The structure loomed above the ruins, its steel framework still intact despite the damage to its upper levels. But it was heavily guarded. 3 alien walkers and a squad of infantry patrolled its perimeter. Kane opened the comm to Voss. "We're in position. Your distraction?" Voss's voice came through with crisp authority. "Stand by. 10 seconds. From Orbit, Aegis Station fired a precise barrage of kinetic slugs at an alien frigate holding low atmosphere position over the next sector. The frigate swerved to evade, its escorts breaking formation to respond. On the ground, the alien guards turned toward the disturbance, leaving an opening. "Move!" Kane ordered. The squad surged forward. Lynn's rail rifle took out 2 infantry, in rapid succession. Kane's grenades arced into the nearest walker's leg joints, blasting it off balance. Ortiz sprinted for the tower's main access point, plugging in his uplink device while the others held the line. One walker swung its weapon toward the group, but Ortiz triggered a signal override. The machine froze, its targeting lens spinning erratically before it abruptly fired straight into the side of another walker. The explosion ripped both apart. "Link is up!" Ortiz shouted over the roar of battle. "We're connected to orbit!" In space, Voss saw the confirmation light. Blink green. "Iron Veil is active," she announced. The orbital interference arrays pulsed at full power, flooding the alien fleet's sensors with noise. At the same time, Ortiz's uplink hijacked command signals to their ground units. Across the planet, alien walkers stalled mid-step, drones spiraled out of the sky, and infantry weapons sputtered uselessly. From the command deck, Reza whispered, "It's working." Voss didn't smile. "Then we press the advantage." Back at the tower, Kane's squad watched the remaining alien troops falter, confusion breaking their normally precise coordination. Kane raised his rifle and spoke into the comm. "Commander, the sector is clear, but they'll adapt fast." Voss's reply came sharp and certain. "Then we hit them faster. Today, Sergeant, the hunt goes both ways. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth was no longer just surviving, it was striking back. The first hours after Operation Iron Veil were euphoric. In every major combat zone, human resistance fighters watched with awe as alien machines faltered, drones fell, and precision patrols dissolved into confusion. For the first time since the assault began, the night sky was quiet enough in some areas for the stars to be visible. Kane's squad had returned to their underground safe house in Sector Delta, every member bone-tired but unable to rest. Ortiz sat slouched against the wall, headset still on, eyes darting across the stream of alien data. Lynn cleaned her rifle in silence. Kane stood at the entrance tunnel, keeping watch despite the fatigue pulling at his eyelids. "Command says we've regained ground in 12 sectors," Ortiz reported. "We've even re-established contact with some resistance cells that were cut off for weeks." "That's the good news," Lynn said, not looking up. "What's the bad news?" Ortiz hesitated before answering. "They're adapting, fast. They've already shifted some units to hardline communications, physical cabling, underground channels. That bypasses most of our interference." Kane rubbed his jaw. "So our window's closing." Before Ortiz could respond, Kane's comm crackled to life. It was Commander Voss. "Sergeant, orbital scans confirm significant redeployment of enemy assets. They've identified the interference hubs and are moving to destroy them. Aegis Station is already under heavy pressure." Kane straightened. "Orders?" "Protect the link in Delta," Voss said firmly. "If they cut this node, Iron Veil collapses across half the planet. And Sergeant, expect heavy resistance." By nightfall, the first enemy counterstrike arrived. It began with a series of faint tremors that rattled dust from the ceiling of the safe house. Kane and Lynn moved to the upper access hatch, peering through the cracked remains of a rooftop. In the distance, they saw the flicker of alien plasma fire painting the skyline. "They're shelling the outskirts," Lynn muttered. "Pushing the civilians inward, flushing us out." Ortiz's voice came sharp over comms. "Multiple walkers inbound, 3, maybe 4, and something else looks like a larger unit, heavier armor. New model." The alien formation moved with mechanical precision, the new unit towering above the rest. Its silhouette was bulkier, with armored plates that seemed to shimmer, distorting targeting sensors. Every step left deep craters in the cracked pavement. Kane knew holding the tower wouldn't be easy. He split the squad into two teams. Lynn and Ortiz would stay near the tower's base to guard the uplink, while Kane and two Resistance volunteers moved forward to create a layered defense. The first walker came into range. Kane aimed his rail rifle at the leg joint, fired, and watched the armor dent but hold. These machines were reinforced. He ducked behind cover as plasma fire scorched the concrete where he'd been standing. From the tower's base, Ortiz activated the alien console interface. "Trying to override," he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. A burst of static filled his headset as the walker's systems resisted the intrusion. Then suddenly, the interface displayed a foreign script flashing red. "They've installed counter-intrusion protocols," Ortiz yelled. "It's like they built a firewall in hours." In orbit, Commander Voss watched her tactical display with mounting concern. The alien fleet had reorganized, using decoy transmissions to mislead Aegis Station's targeting. They no longer appeared as scattered or confused. Their formations were tightening, focusing fire on the interference satellites. "Commander," Reza said, "we'll lose 2 satellites in the next 10 minutes unless we pull them out of formation." Voss shook her head. "If we break formation now, the interference field collapses." She opened a direct channel to Kane. "Sergeant, I'm holding them as long as I can. You need to keep that Delta uplink alive, no matter the cost." The larger armored unit finally entered the fray. Kane watched as its chest compartment opened, revealing a swirling core of blue energy. He had seconds to react. "Lynn, now!" he shouted. From her position, Lynn launched a high-impact EMP shell at the unit. The blast struck, briefly shrouding the machine in a haze of electric arcs. For a heartbeat, Kane thought it had worked. Then the arcs dissipated, and the unit kept walking, unshaken. Ortiz's voice came again, breathless. "That thing's running on a hybrid power system. EMP barely touches it." Kane knew they were outmatched in direct firepower. He looked around at the crumbling buildings and had a reckless idea. "Ortiz, can you make their targeting system think I'm standing? 20 meters to the left," Ortiz frowned but typed rapidly. "I can try." Seconds later, the armored unit's head swiveled away from Kane's position and fired into empty rubble. Kane didn't wait. He sprinted forward, planted explosive charges on the unit's exposed joint, and dove back behind cover. The detonation ripped the joint apart, sending the towering machine crashing to the ground. For a brief moment, the resistance fighters dared to believe they could hold. But over comms, Voss's voice cut in, grim and urgent. "They've stopped trying to destroy the interference satellites and are heading straight for Earth's surface. They're bringing their fleet down to crush the source directly. This fight isn't over. It's about to escalate." The night sky turned silver. It wasn't the light of the moon, but the glare of dozens of alien vessels cutting through the upper atmosphere, their hulls shimmering as heat peeled away in glowing waves. From the streets of Delta Sector, Kane and his squad could see them descending like silent meteors, scattering clouds into spirals. Ortiz's voice was low but urgent. "They're bypassing orbital defenses. That means they're willing to risk atmospheric entry for a direct strike." Lynn adjusted her rifle scope, watching the largest of the ships break from formation. "That one's heading for us. They know the interference hub's here." Kane opened a comm channel to Commander Voss. "We've got eyes on the lead vessel. Size classification?" There was a pause, then Voss replied, "Titan-class dropship. It's a mobile fortress. If it lands intact, they'll flood the city with ground forces and crush every remaining resistance cell." Up on Aegis Station, Voss had no choice but to divide her forces. The station's main batteries pivoted toward the descending fleet, sending lances of blue plasma into the dark. 2 alien ships flared brightly and fell apart mid-air, but most continued their descent, protected by shield harmonics that bent incoming fire. Reza's tone was clipped as he relayed sensor readings. Those harmonics are adapting faster than our weapons can recalibrate. Every time we shift frequency, they're countering within seconds. Voss stared at the tactical display. Then we need to give them something they can't counter. Target their landing vectors, make them fight gravity as well as us. The station's rail cannons began firing at the ground in front of the descending ships, destabilizing the air currents and creating pockets of turbulence. Two smaller craft wobbled, clipped each other, and spun off course. But the Titan-class fortress remained steady, an unstoppable wall of metal and purpose. On the ground, Kane's squad prepared for impact. The lead vessel's hull glowed red as it slowed, repulsors roaring. Kane ordered the civilians in nearby shelters to be evacuated further underground. If we hold them off long enough, the interference network can keep running. If we fail... He let the unspoken outcome hang in the air. Lynn crouched beside him, checking her gear. We'll have one shot when the landing doors open. They'll be vulnerable for just a few seconds. Ortiz tapped into the alien console again, fighting to keep their interference alive. If I can sync the hub to the station's targeting systems, we might disrupt their shields for a heartbeat. But it's going to burn this node out permanently. Kane didn't hesitate. Do it! The ground shook as the Titan-class fortress touched down. Dust and debris billowed outward, coating the streets in a haze. The landing doors began to lower with a slow, mechanical groan, revealing the silhouettes of alien soldiers inside. Sleek armor, glowing visors, and weapons that hummed with a low, threatening tone. Ortiz slammed his palm on the console. Shield disruption in 3, 2, 1! A sudden pulse of static tore through the air. The shimmer around the alien troops flickered, and Lynn didn't waste a second. She fired a high-caliber round straight into the nearest soldier. The alien crumpled before the shield reactivated, and the others charged forward. Kane tossed a plasma grenade into the landing bay. It detonated in a burst of light, forcing the first wave to scatter. But more poured out, their precision fire, driving the squad back toward the uplink tower. Above them, Aegis Station engaged in a desperate gambit. Commander Voss ordered all available gunships to drop into the atmosphere in low-orbit strafing runs, ignoring the risk of alien anti-air fire. The sky filled with streaks of light as human fighters weaved between descending enemy ships, launching volleys of missiles that left trails of fire through the haze. Reza reported, "We've disabled 2 more landers, but the Titan fortress is dug in. They've deployed perimeter turrets. Any air support inside the blast zone will get shredded." Voss clenched her jaw. "Then we'll make our own opening. Patch me through to Kane." "Kane," Voss said over the comm, "we're sending in a strike package to your location, but you'll need to knock out those perimeter turrets first. Think you can do it?" Kane glanced at the approaching alien line, and then at Lynn. She nodded without a word. "We'll get it done, Commander. Just be ready when we open the gap." The squad moved low through the ruined streets, dodging plasma fire as they flanked the alien fortress. Lynn took the left turret, dropping to one knee and firing a precisely aimed explosive round that blew its emitter apart. Kane sprinted toward the right turret, vaulted over a collapsed beam, and planted charges at its base. The detonation shook the street, and suddenly the landing zone was exposed. Voss's voice came through, calm but fierce. "All units, strike now!" A squadron of human gunships roared in, unleashing a storm of fire and missiles into the exposed landing bay. Alien troops scattered as explosions tore through the fortress interior. Kane's squad fell back to the uplink tower, breathing hard, but still alive. Overhead, however, more alien ships were breaking through the atmosphere. The battle wasn't over. It was spreading. Voss's closing words over the comm were heavy, with resolve. "We've bought ourselves time, but they're coming in greater numbers now. The final push is ahead. We either end this in the next wave, or Earth falls." The air was thick with smoke and the scent of scorched metal. Across the ruined skyline, streaks of plasma traced arcs between alien vessels and human defense lines. The Titan-class fortress still loomed in the center of Delta Sector. Battered, but not broken, its armored hull marked by the scars of the last strike. Commander Voss stood on Aegis Station's command deck, her eyes locked on the tactical display. Red blips filled the lower atmosphere, each one an alien vessel closing in on the ground. Blue markers representing human forces were dwindling. The next few hours would decide the fate of the planet. Reza spoke quietly, though urgency edged his voice. If their reinforcements make landfall, there won't be enough of us left to hold any sector. Voss turned to him. Then we stop them before they touch down. She opened a comm channel to Kane's squad. Kane, the fortress is the control point for their surface operations. If it goes down, their fleet coordination collapses. But you're out of time. The next wave is already inbound. Kane crouched behind a collapsed wall, Lynn and Ortiz beside him, their armor scratched and smoke-stained. Around them, the streets were littered with debris, burned-out vehicles, shattered buildings, and the faint echoes of distant firefights. "We're not walking away from this one, are we?" Lynn asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Kane glanced at her, then at Ortiz. "Doesn't matter. If we finish the job, Earth gets another sunrise." Ortiz's fingers flew over his portable console. "I can reroute the interference hub into an overload cycle. It'll send a massive feedback surge into the fortress's comm relay. That should disable their shields completely." Lynn nodded. "And when their shields are gone, we hit them with everything we've got." High above, Aegis Station prepared for the strike. Voss ordered all remaining gunships, fighters, and orbital artillery to coordinate on Kane's mark. Every available pilot knew the stakes. There would be no retreat, no second attempt. Reza monitored the alien fleet, watching for any signs of counterattack. "They're shifting formations. It's like they know what we're about to do." Voss's gaze sharpened. "Then we move. Faster than they expect." On the ground, Kane's squad pushed toward the fortress under heavy fire. Alien soldiers moved in disciplined waves, their plasma rifles carving glowing scars into the rubble. Kane fired in short, precise bursts, cutting down enemies as Lynn covered their flank. Ortiz set the hub's overload timer. 30 seconds, once I hit the trigger. After that, the feedback will blow the uplink apart. They reached the fortress perimeter. Lynn fired an armor-piercing round into the landing bay entrance, clearing the last 2 sentries. Kane waved Ortiz forward. "Do it!" Ortiz slammed his palm onto the console. The interference hub's hum deepened into a low, resonant vibration, and a shimmer of static danced across the fortress's shield. From Aegis Station, Reza's voice rang out. "Shields are down!" Voss didn't hesitate. "All units, strike!" The sky lit up with the combined fury of humanity's arsenal. Orbital plasma beams punched through the fortress's hull, followed by swarms of missiles from descending gunships. Fire bloomed across its armored surface, venting smoke and debris into the air. Kane's squad ducked into a nearby building as the shockwave rolled over the city. The fortress groaned, metal twisting and splitting under the relentless assault. Inside, the alien vessel explosions ripped through key support struts. Its engines howled as containment fields failed, and a cascade of secondary blasts tore along its flanks. And yet, it didn't fall. The Titan-class fortress, though crippled, was still powering its core weapon systems. A blinding beam shot upward. Toward Aegis Station, the energy surge so intense that the station's shields flared dangerously. Voss made the call without hesitation. "Bring the station into low orbit. We'll finish this ourselves." The massive form of Aegis Station descended through the atmosphere, its heat shields blazing. Gun emplacements opened fire at point-blank range, cutting deep into the fortress's remaining armor. The alien vessel's core finally ruptured, releasing a rolling sphere of fire that consumed its hull in seconds. On the ground, Kane's squad watched the flames climb into the sky. The shockwave rattled their bones, but when the smoke cleared, the fortress was gone. The alien fleet overhead wavered, formations breaking, coordination lost. One by one, their ships began to retreat, streaking back toward the upper atmosphere. Ortiz exhaled, sinking to the ground. "They're leaving," Lynn kept her eyes on the sky. "Not because they can't win, but because now they know they might lose." Hours later, Kane stood among the survivors in Delta Sector. Fires still burned in the distance, and the air was filled with the hum of medevac craft, but the city stood, and so did Earth. On Aegis Station, Commander Voss delivered a single message to every frequency in range. "This is Earth. We endured your surprise assault. We are still here, and if you come again, you will find the same answer." For the first time since the battle began, there was silence across the comm channels. Humanity had not just survived, they had proven themselves. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Empire was now rethinking its war. The sun broke over the horizon, casting light on the battered planet below. Against all odds, Earth had seen another dawn.